Welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks, how to get it just right. Thank you so much for joining us for another hour, another session of an invigorating conversation. You are going to absolutely love our guest today, and you obviously know her already because she is back by popular demand. And today we are going to talk about how do you courageously discover your power? Do you know how to tap in to yourself and recognize and find your power? And once you recognize it, do you have the tools to put it to the right use and show up just right? Just like Goldilocks, do you know to show up just right, to live your purpose and thrive? And do you really dare to boldly embrace your power? You know, Goldilocks reminds us that everything is already inside of us. We just need to know that balance. How do we show up just right so that we're not too hard, not too soft, not too cold, not too hot? And when you recognize your power from within, how do you modulate it? How do you show up? And how do you truly bring it out at the right time, at the right level to truly thrive and truly shine? To have this conversation with me is a international bestselling author who has co-authored multiple books. Karen Ann Bulluck, welcome back to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks.
Thank you, Dr. Cass. It's really fun to be back. I always enjoy my conversations with you, and I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you. So you are a coach. You are a woman who is helping many individuals tap into their power and unleash it so that they can transcend their circumstances. What made you take a look at this particular aspect and why this book? Because you're releasing a book, so I want to tie your message, your work, and this exciting new book that is going to launch.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting the way the book came to be, because I started out after I left my corporate career writing a leadership book. I wanted to share some of my experiences and, talk about discovering power. But the book, honestly, it was terrible. I mean, it was just awful. And so I put it aside, and one day I went out for a walk, and I started to hear Cheryl's story, and Cheryl's the heroine of the book. And I started to hear her story in my head. And actually what I heard that day came back and is the prologue of the book that I'm releasing now. And it kind of built from there, because I found that through telling the story in fiction, it allowed me to weave in lots of different perspectives, lots of different circumstances, and more importantly, I think to tie into what you said as for your introduction, the inner struggle that we go through to really not only discover our power, but how to bring it out when we do, because it is a balancing act. It is a matter of getting it just right. We don't want to come on too strong. We don't want to, be too soft in our approach. And in the book, I was able to explore Cheryl's emotions, thought processing, and her inner struggle to try to find that balance, not only to find her power, but to try to find that balance.
Mm-hmm. So I've had the pleasure of getting a pre-read, doing the review, and truly embracing the essence of the message. I don't want to give away the plot, because the goal here is to allow you to present the curiosity aspect so that folks will actually go and buy the book. So I want you to talk a little bit about, in the process of writing the book, what did you discover about yourself, and how is that going to help individuals discover something within them? Because as a writer, that is your goal.
Absolutely. And I think, oops, my cat wants to join us today. And I think in the process of writing, it was a process in some ways of discovering my own power as a writer, as a creative person. And one of the reasons I left my corporate career is I felt like I wasn't able to express my creative side as much as I really wanted to. And so part of the process of writing this book for me was really exploring and developing and unleashing, to use your word earlier, unleashing that creativity that is in me and really that is in all of us. And one of the things in the process of writing the book and unleashing my own creativity and exploring that, I realized that there's a lot of creativity we can bring in different aspects of our lives. It's not just necessarily through art or writing or those kinds of things, but Cheryl looks for creative solutions. And there's creativity in many aspects of our lives that we often don't tap into. And I think that was one of the big takeaways for me in writing this book.
I love what I'm hearing, and that is common, right? Especially as women, we focus on everybody's lives around us, whether it's the spouse, whether it's the children, the parents. We are so good at focusing on others, we forget to focus on us. Yeah. And here you are giving every reader an opportunity to take that introspective walk. What are you hoping to get out of this? If you wanted 3 things to come out of this for every reader, what is your hope? What is your wish for them?
Well, first and foremost, I want people to be inspired to your point, to go onto that inner journey, to really dig deep and find out what matters most to them, because that's ultimately what Cheryl has to grapple with, is what matters most to her, and how is she going to embrace that, and how is she going to express that in the world. So I really want people to be inspired to explore what matters most to them. And secondly, I want people to look at their work, particularly people that are in the corporate world, look at their work through a different lens. I mean, I think Cheryl takes a step back from her career and looks at it from a different perspective, partially encouraged by some of her staff members, but partially encouraged by her own inner conflict. And in stepping back and taking a fresh look at our careers, whatever they are, we can often discover things about ourselves and about how we can interact with that environment in ways that we never thought of before. So I really want people to be inspired to look at their own work differently. And third, I think it's about finding our voice, right? Particularly for women. I want women to really find their voices and find the courage to use their voices.
That is such an important message for all of us. And I'm so glad through a process of storytelling, you are bringing that aspiration and that desire out. And the power of storytelling is it's not about them. It's about taking a shared journey with somebody else, the heroine of the book, right? And in that process, in a very gentle way, each reader is going to start thinking about themselves. So I love the intricate way in which you have woven it. Okay. And you and I come from the corporate career, the finance world. There is no such thing as creativity in finance, because if you are, you're in jail, right? So here is an opportunity for you to truly showcase your creativity as a storyteller.
Yeah.
What are you hoping that not just individuals, but when they go into their workplace, when they go into their organizations, what kind of a organizational mindset, organizational culture would you want to see this start to percolate? Because when you transform a person, it doesn't stop there.
No, absolutely not. And I think that's the beauty of it. And that's the beauty of, to your point, the storytelling, to have people look at things differently. And the question about what kind of organization, the book that I did with you, the Ennobling Business book, I wrote about, the corporate culture in that book, and somewhat my vision for it, which translates into discovering power as well. And it really is creating an organization that allows for everyone's voice to be heard, and particularly women's voices, because they're not always encouraged or supported as much as we would like them to be in corporate environments. But everybody's voice is important. And I think that's one of the beauties of the story, is there's a lot of different voices. And that's why I love the storytelling process, because I could bring in different people's voices and perspectives that all need to be heard. And I think that's really what I would love people to bring into the corporate environment, is the ability to really hear and amplify everybody's voice, not just a few.
Mhm. That is such a timely and relevant message. And the reason I say that is we live in a day and age where everything is so polarized, right? So you're either hot or cold, you're black or white, you're right or wrong. And that is all perspective, because what's right for you may be wrong for me, and reality happens somewhere in between. So as folks read this and start thinking about, I need to show up with my voice and have the courage to share my voice, share my message, what is your thoughts on an environment that punishes somebody who doesn't fit into that mainstream ideology of that organization, of that moment? It's true socially, it is true nationally, and it's true sometimes even inside a household.
Yeah.
That one child may be considered the black sheep because they look at the world differently. They see the rainbow and they see more colors than the rest of the group.
Yeah. And it's so true that we get so polarized, we get so caught up in that black and white world. And the world isn't black and white. The world is nuanced. The world has so many beautiful colors in between black and white that we often forget to look at. And I think that's one of the things that in storytelling is so beautiful, is that you can bring out the nuances, and hopefully you can help people see, my goal would be to help people really see the nuances. Cheryl struggles with this stuff because it's not black and white. There's not in some places, yes, there's a clear cut right and wrong, but most of the time it's not clear cut. And she has people in her life, like we all have people in our lives, that disagree with her and tell her she's wrong and say, no, you need to stay with the status quo. And she struggles with that too, because we all have that. And a lot of corporate cultures do punish us for not conforming, not staying with the party line, so to speak, particularly when you get in leadership. Like you're part of the leadership team, and you're supposed to represent the leadership team and the views of the leadership team, which is one of the things that Cheryl is so aware of in the book. She's part of the leadership team. She's supposed to be supporting the party line. And if she's not agreeing with the party line, what does she do with that? And so many organizations really force people to stay in the party line. And we lose so much creativity. We lose so much opportunity by doing that, because it's really the opportunities in the world are in those in-between spaces. They're not in the black and white. The opportunities are in all the various colors in between. And when we stay in a black or white mode, we're just losing so many opportunities. And that really is what organizations that insist on one way of doing things are really missing and losing out on.
Totally. And two things come to my mind as we're talking about this. As a graduate school professor, I'm teaching leadership and finance in the classroom. And one of the topics I am dealing with right now with my students is the pitfalls of groupthink.
Yeah.
If everybody falls in line and everybody is saying the same thing, collectively, the leadership has lost perspective.
Yeah.
Technically, they're no longer leading, they've become dogmatic, and they've taken away the psychological safety. And therefore, there is no innovation. Therefore, there is no sustainable competitive advantage. Therefore, there is no economic growth. So the entire purpose of running an organization is compromised.
Absolutely.
And so the question becomes, is your ego more important and being right? Versus what is the power of the organization when you give people the opportunity to experiment and be safely, psychologically safely innovate?
Absolutely. And, one of my favorite topics is to talk about is risk taking. Now, I am a risk taking coach, and that's what I help people do. And that's what Cheryl does some risk taking in the book. And you'll have to read it to find out what exactly risks she takes. But risk taking is so critical for leadership. But when we get into that group think mode, when we get into that conformity place, the risk taking goes away, right? And with that, the innovation and creativity goes away. And we have to live outside of our comfort zones. We have to step out of our comfort zones. And when we get into that conformity group think mode, everybody knows what the rules are and they can all stay within that comfort zone. But to your point, it shuts down creativity, and ultimately it's going to shut down the growth of an organization. Because you cannot grow either as an individual or as an organization without being outside of your comfort zone. And if you stay in that groupthink inside the comfort zone, you're not taking any risks with what you say, what you do, your growth is limited.
Absolutely. So why the name Cheryl, and why the main character as a female? Talk about it.
I'm not even sure where the name Cheryl came from. I have some friends named Cheryl, but that was just the name that came to me. But it was important for me that the main character was a woman because, well, first of all, she reflects to some degree. It is not an autobiographical story by any means, but she does reflect some of my experiences as a woman in the workplace. And she is newly promoted to a really big position that she's the first woman in. And there's that real uncertainty in being the first, because you don't know what the rules are. She doesn't know quite what all the rules are that she's supposed to be following. And there really are no rules for her because she's the first. And so I thought it was really important to represent that female voice in a way that is also representing all people that are stepping into firsts, stepping into breaking the glass ceilings in whatever way, shape, or form, because there's a risk in doing that, and there's an uncertainty, but there's also a freedom in that, and there's an opportunity in it to reshape things. And we don't know when we step into those roles. We often go back to, okay, I have to conform, right? Because I have to fit in now that I'm in this new role, I have to fit in. But then that kind of defeats the purpose of us being in the new role. And it defeats the purpose of us really being able to add value in those situations. So as Cheryl navigates this new role that she's in, she has to decide, okay, how am I going to fit in and be part of this new group that I'm in, but also bring my values, bring the things that I can contribute to the table too. And I think a lot of people in new positions struggle with that, no matter where you are on the totem pole. But and especially when you're the first, whether you're the first woman or the first, whatever in a situation, it changes things.
So interesting you say that. When a person is the first in that role, normally it's their own that are harder. So if a woman is in a role, it's the other women who are harder on that woman. If it's a racial thing, it's their own race that is harder. Oh, he or she is acting like they are better than us, right? Or everything they do is put through a microscope, and I wouldn't have done that. We don't know what we would do. Talk to me about, you're based on your own experience, based on Cheryl's experience through this journey. How can people learn to be supportive when somebody shatters the glass ceiling and gets to a place where nobody has been before? It's like me watching Neil Armstrong walking on the moon and saying, oh, that's not how you walk. I would have given him walking practice, like he should do a catwalk. Well, the moon doesn't have gravity. You can't do a catwalk, right? So what does that guidance to everybody else looks like? Because our ability to cheer somebody on and celebrate somebody allows us to then think about, when our turn comes, how are we going to show up, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny you brought that up, because I wrote an article not too long ago about what they call, I guess, tall poppy syndrome is the name of it relative to women these days. And when other women tear women down when they've gotten to a successful place, when they've broken a glass ceiling or moved ahead. And there's such an element of that in our society today that's really disturbing, because it really speaks to how insecure we are ourselves, right? When you want to tear someone else down, you're often doing it because you're judging yourself even worse than you're judging someone else, right? A lot of times there's a lot of self-judgment in that, and we don't even realize we're doing it to ourselves. We don't even really realize the negative self-talk that we engage in that then spills over into how we talk about other people. And so what I'd really love to see is people stop criticizing themselves so much. You stop being so hard on yourself, because when you give yourself grace, then it's so much easier to give other people grace. And we don't even realize that when we're being hard on someone else, we're really being hard on ourselves. And that's really what's sad, because we should be our own biggest supporters. So if we learn to be our own biggest supporters first, then we can help other people and support them too.
And the energy we put out comes back to us, right? So hold the thought. We have a very interesting question coming from our live audience. Robin, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I was driving somewhere, but I pulled over so I can talk to you and say it's always thrilling and wonderful to see you. And so I love your commentary about, well, first I'll say, it's been said, fiction is the lie that gets us to the truth. And about, thinking outside the box versus being all in step lock. And I think there's a balance, again, appropriate for the Goldilocks show, the balance between, having lots of new ideas, taking lots of risks, and, having some conformity and not falling into chaos. It reminds me of when there's a lot of talk about disruption. We need to bring disruption. And then someone said, well, what about the trash collectors? Do we want disruption with the trash collectors? No, we want all to be, very reliable and dependable. So how do we find that balance between, within management or within an organization, thinking outside the box, thinking creatively, whatever that word is, and then but then also having a united voice or having some coherency within how they operate. I think there's a balance. So how do you manage that and think about that?
Absolutely. That is an awesome question. And the first thing that came to my mind is vision, right? When we share a vision, then we have a container for that creativity. And I think for me, I talk about risk taking, taking risks, but not being reckless, right? And so being reckless is free form, going off without thinking things through, just being impulsive, right? And there's a difference between being impulsive and being reckless and taking risks. And so a risk-taking environment is going to allow ideas to percolate up, but not for people to run willy-nilly with those ideas, right? It's to share them and see how those ideas fit into the shared vision, not the shared restriction, but the shared vision of the organization and of the people in the organization. And I think that often, if organizations really have strong value set, a strong mission and vision for themselves, then those new ideas and the risks can fall within that container. And that allows us to create that balance.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank
Thanks
you
for the
for that.
question.
Thank you for that insightful question, Robin. And I love where you took the answer, Karen. So I love the way you phrased the question, Robin, about do we want to disrupt trash collection, right? So immediately my mind went to Singapore. Singapore has figured out how do we collect trash every day and dispose of it in a way that we're generating our entire country's electricity through that trash collection process. How are we keeping our country clean, and how are we becoming environmentally responsible and sustainable? And so the way they disrupted their trash collection is improved their sustainability and their economic prosperity. So one man's trash is another man's treasure, and they took everybody's collective trash and made it a national treasure, right? So to me, the goal isn't that shared purpose, shared vision that you're talking about, Karen. But when we're anchored in the vision, how we talk about it and the route we take can be different.
Yeah.
And therefore, it gives opportunity to look at different perspectives and land on a synthesized, integrated approach that actually is going to be better than either or. Because I always jokingly say, if we live in a binary world, we should be inside a computer. Only computers are programmed with zeros and ones. The rest of us live in a world where everything is fluid and it's supposed to be non-binary, right? Gender is not binary, right and wrong is not binary, decisions are not binary, life is not binary, right? There is something between living and dying. Some of us think that somebody in our family died and 2 days later they're back, right? So as we bring this to a close, Karen, what is your words of wisdom to individuals and organizations to keep that purpose and vision front and center, but explore courageously all the alternatives so that each individual doesn't shortchange ourselves? It takes a lot of courage.
It absolutely does take a lot of courage. And I think one of the biggest things, and it comes back to what I said earlier about judgment, it really comes back to organizations and individuals learning the difference between discernment and judgment. Because discernment allows us to look at ideas and find the value in them. And find the places where maybe the value doesn't exist today, right? Might exist in the future, but maybe it doesn't exist today. Judgment is what shuts things down. Judgment is when we start saying right, wrong, good, bad, labeling things, labeling people, creating that binary world that takes all the color, all the nuance, and all the possibility out of it. So for me, for individuals and organizations, it's learning that difference between true discernment and judgment, and practicing discernment and stopping with the judging, because the judging is really what shuts everything down. And I work with my clients in a framework called positive intelligence, and it talks about the judge, our inner critic, being the biggest thing that everybody deals with. We all deal with that. We all have that inner critic, that judge. And if we can learn to silence and turn down the volume on that judge, it can change everything.
Absolutely. And that judge comes from our inner trauma. So it's not coming from a happy place.
Nope.
It comes from the most traumatic place and therefore leads to destruction. So I am totally hearing you. I cannot wait for your book to come out for everybody to read. So let's take a moment and share with our audience, when is the book launch and where and how they can get a copy?
Well, the book launch is on May 24th. The book is called Discovering Power, and it actually is the first book in a trilogy. So it's called the Ascending Ladders series. And they can sign up now to get all the information about the book and to be entered into a drawing for a free book at ascendingladders.com and get all the updates. And you can follow me on LinkedIn or my Facebook page. Both are Karen Ann Bulluck, to get information and to get that link for the book, the ebook on Amazon on May 24th. There'll be a special price for the first 24 hours of $1.99. So it's a bargain too. And I would love to have everybody just, join me in celebrating Cheryl and her journey.
I am so excited that Cheryl's story, your storytelling is going to be out there very shortly, and it's going to help people see the nuances of life and take a page from that to transform their own. So thank you so much for making the time and joining this conversation and planting the seeds for taking that inner journey to discover their own power. Because there is nothing more important in this world than each of us tapping into our own power with the realization that our soul is truly the divine within. And when I tap into my own divine power, there is no stopping the potential that gets unleashed. And what safer way, what magical way than discovering it through a story? So congratulations, Karen. And we cannot wait to celebrate your book with Cheryl's story and take this continued journey with you. And for our audience out there, stop for a moment. Whatever it is you're doing, just pause. Take a deep breath and think about, are you connected to yourself inside? And when you think about it, how are you going to tap into your inner self? Do you truly understand and value the power that is contained within you? Yes, there is value. A lot of times other people don't see the value in us because we don't see the value. So let's name it, let's celebrate it, and let's unleash it. And unleash it with all the optimism and joy, because then the energy you put out is going to attract positivity towards you. And that energy and your power is only going to create that flow effect that's going to make transformation happen so that you can transcend what is in front of you. With that nugget, we wish you a wonderful week ahead. And remember to discover your own power and be in that place where you continually unleash what is truly brilliant inside of you.